Good evening and welcome to the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union Board meeting. It is Wednesday, July 28th. If you'd all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you and welcome. The first order of business is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. General public comment. We don't have anyone here with us in the meeting room. Is there anyone that is on, that is the public? And we can see everyone that's on tonight, right?
Yep. Jeff is our strategic plan
Right,
presentation.
presenter, right. Okay, so we have no public. So the minutes of June 23rd, a motion would be in order to approve the minutes of June 23rd as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mike, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Tina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Pretty sure that was an aye to vote yes, right?
I believe so.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Approval of warrants. Warrants are sent to you via your email from Lori, I think, for GRCSU. So questions should, of course, be directed to Lewis. So a motion will be in order for approval of warrants.
I'll move to approve the warrants 195 and 197.
All right, motion to approve warrants 195 and 197. Is there a second?
I'll second. Or Seth, whatever.
Second by Seth. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Chris, as you all know, isn't with us this evening, but Lisa's here, so we're going to let her do the superintendent and assistant superintendent report. So I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. You have Chris's written report. He did not leave me with any additional updates beyond what's in there in writing, but I am, as always, happy to try and answer any questions or take things back to him and get additional information, or to try and expand on anything that's in here if I have the information and you so desire.
Questions or comments on Chris's written report? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to Lisa's report.
Okay, very similarly, you have my written report. One of the things that's in there that I just would like to take another moment to speak about was the administrative retreat and the coaches retreats that we've had this month. We call them retreats, you know, they're here in central office, not anywhere fancy or fun, but just such excellent professional time, great conversations. Every time we get our principals together for a conversation, I'm reminded of what a powerhouse team we have here in the leadership of GRCSU, and just so grateful. And it was the first time that we had all physically been in the same place in 18 months,
Wow.
Which was amazing. And to be able to have people just have conversations with each other throughout the day in small groups and in pairs. We spent a lot of time talking about instructional leadership. You'll hear from Chris and I throughout the year. We're really trying to move beyond the pandemic and have our principals refocus again on the quality of classroom instruction, and hope we can get them away from that day-to-day safety and health mitigation management that has taken so much of their time in the last year and a half, and get them back into the classrooms and support them in doing that. A very, very important work. So a great week with them. Similarly with the coaching team, we have 2 new coaches joining the team this year, and to joining the 2 coaches that are returning. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the team, how it will work together, but also kind of renorming the coach position. Our coaches over the last year and a half have also done a lot of things that are a little bit out beyond the scope of their roles. They have been jack of all trades, and whoever needed them, whatever was needed, even so far as covering classes and lunch duties and things that are not normally within the scope of their work. So we're trying to create some materials together that really clarify again the intent and purpose of that role, and are able to, we're going to bring those forward to the schools this fall to help remind everyone that post-pandemic, in a post-pandemic world, we'd like to return to the true purpose of that position, and again, focused on teaching and learning, getting into classrooms and working with teachers to the greatest extent possible, in addition to the amazing professional development they do. So we're just very grateful for the time that we've had with those two groups of instructional leaders in our district, and really energized and excited about the work that we're going to be doing all together this year.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa? All right, thank you. Looking forward to a successful, normal year. All right, moving on to personnel. Resignations. We have a resignation from Lisa Dayton and a relocation for Cassidy Humphrey. Any questions? A motion would be in order to approve those recommendations.
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Lynette. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Just for your information, in the packet there is open positions, and then we also have contract recommendations. So we have Emily Fox for professional staff. For support staff, we have Marilyn Garrow, Sherry Trombley, Heather McGee, and extracurricular, which is a summer program, Kathleen Crowan. Are there any questions about any of those recommendations? A motion would be in order to approve the contract recommendations.
I'll move to accept the contract recommendations.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes, and I guess I skipped ahead. So the vacancies are in your packet for information only across the SU. Finance, we will move to Lewis.
Well,
Oh, did you have a
before we
question?
move- I was just curious, since Christine's on, I was just curious how we're doing, because I've seen these vacancies for quite a while now, especially in the special education factor. And I know that I've sat on a lot of the hiring committees at our school, and I know that we're all getting anxious to know what's going on. So I was just wondering if she could update us on how that's going.
Sure. Did you hear that, Christine?
Yeah, just we're advertising. We're advertising on Indeed. We're advertising in School Spring. Any applicant that comes up, we interview. There is a shortage throughout the state of special educators. I will be honest, we have lost several applicants due to other SUs that are paying higher than we are. And people have choices. I know throughout Greater Rutland County, or Rutland County, the SUs all around us are short-staffed as well, both for para positions and for special educators. The state has just put together a committee to, doesn't really help us this year, but they are looking into kind of ways they can attract people into that profession. We look at pretty much every applicant we can to even see if someone might have the background and/or something that we could use even through a provisional license.
So,
We're doing all the time.
Lisa.
I couldn't understand.
Christine, could you just repeat that last part?
I said, we're just interviewing, and every time we can, an applicant comes in, we immediately reach out to them and interview.
Can, have we reposted the want ad, I guess, so that it's like closer to the top?
Yeah,
School spring?
Christine McGinnis regularly reposts that. We've reposted it in different ways for the schools that are still open, for GRCSU.
Do you have a plan going forward of what we're going to do come September 1st if we don't have these positions filled?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to shift caseloads somewhat and look at staffing and how do we shift caseloads, and caseloads may be a little larger than what they typically are. But we had to do that this previous year too, because we did not fill all of our positions.
Just to clarify one thing that Christine said, it's not so much that our pay scale is not competitive with other districts around us. The issue that we're finding is that it's how we're able to place them based on the current master agreement. So it is something that the negotiations team is aware of and is taking into consideration.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Louis, you're up.
Okay, I don't have a lot for you tonight. As far as financials go, there are some system-generated printouts in the packet. I won't have year-end financials until the August meeting. That's typically when I share those. We're still working on closing the year, cleaning up accounts. We're still getting some stuff in that we're processing. And so I'll usually have final numbers probably the very beginning of August. So I'll be able to share those with your local boards at the August meeting and then the SU at the August meeting as well. The one thing I do have for you tonight just is our food service account did end in a positive amount. So the SU ended with a surplus of $57,000. About $6,000 of that is carryover from FY20, and then the remaining $51,000 is from this year. The main reason for that is that the program that we were running our food service under for FY21, which was the summer food service program, does offer higher reimbursement rates, which did allow us to cover our costs better and then with that surplus. I did have a meeting with our food service director and our regional director about 2 weeks ago, and then I had one principal and one board member sit in on that meeting. We talked about ways to improve the program. So hopefully a lot of good ideas came out of that, and so we're working now on working towards improving the program for the next school year. We are looking at being back to a regular program with salad bar in the cafeteria. So hopefully that being able to offer more options will allow us to improve the quality and the options of the program. But one thing I do have that I'd like to say, out of that $57,000 surplus, I'm looking to purchase it's just some supplies for the salad bar, just some new bowls and stuff, which is a small cost it's for all the schools, it's about $2,000. And then there's, it's actually about $1,500. And then there's one piece of equipment for $4,400, which is a new refrigerated open display merchandiser for Rutland Town School. So this is to replace whatever they have to allow, as people go through the line, to be able to see all the options that are out, that are available. So after that, we'll still have about a $51,000 surplus that we go into FY21 with.
Does he need a motion for that purchase, or?
I don't need a motion, I'm just, but if there's any questions, I'm willing to take those.
And remind us, Louis, that the food service is operating with respect to payment the same as last year, or are we having students pay?
Yep, so for the next school, right now we're still working under the summer food service program, but as of the first day of school, we'll be working under a different program called the Seamless Summer Program. It works similar to the summer food service program in that it's still free for all students. However, it does allow us less flexibility as far as with the summer food, people can pick it up and bring it home. They can pick up multiple days meals. That all goes away. So right now we can still offer free meals, but they have to be consumed in the schools by the students that are in attendance. So it will be a open enrolled site, which means it's open to any students that are in the school, that are enrolled in the school. So any students that are homeschooled won't be able to participate.
Okay.
And just to further clarify on that surplus amount, any food service surplus has to stay in the food service account and be used for food service expenditures. So that's 57,000 minus whatever we spend on supplies and equipment. We'll continue to roll forward, and we'll use it in the future for equipment, other equipment needs, as well as if we don't run a surplus this following year, then we'll offset that with these funds.
Okay.
And that would only pertain to GRCSU food service, which would be Rutland Town and Corey Valley. Wellsprings operates their own account.
Okay. Any questions for Louis? All right, hearing none, we will move on to policies. So this is the second read for the equity policy, which means it's come through every local board twice and is now here at this board for the final read. So a motion would be in order.
I'll move to approve the equity policy.
Motion by Lynette, second.
I'll second.
Second by Tina. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. The other thing I'd like to just speak to under policy is to send to the policy committee, to Eric, who is the policy chair. One is for animals on school property, and having a policy in place where we don't have animals on school property. I don't know if other local districts had that prior to merger. We did within our SU, and I'd just like to see the policy committee work on that. If you've been to some outdoor events, it's surprising we don't have bigger issues than we have with the number of animals that come to sporting events with small children. And I also just stop and think locally what some of us invest in athletic fields, that it would be nice not to have them being used as dog runs. So, and the second piece is, as we get forward the second policy and go to the beginning of school, is the flag policy, kind of looking at an interim policy, as absence of policy is no policy. And so if we could create an interim policy that would cover all of our districts as we begin school, and whatever the recommendation is coming from the policy committee, what interim looks like, if that's 6 months or a year, and then you have the opportunity to reevaluate or look at that a little deeper. But I think it would be remiss of us not to have some kind of policy in place with respect to that. Are there any concerns from board members about sending that to the policy committee?
No, I have no problem with sending it to them, but I believe we're gonna have a problem passing one.
Well, I think it depends on what they come back with. I think that they could probably come back with something that is acceptable to everyone. I have confidence in the leadership within the policy committee.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the dog issue or the animal issue, is there going to be an enforcement consideration, or because if somebody brings something, whatever, you can say we have a policy against it, but then what?
Well, I guess I mean, I don't, when you look at our policies, different policies have, I guess, enforcement pieces. We can ask them to leave property. It's school property that we govern, so if we say, if we say you're not allowed to smoke on school property, then we tell you you have to leave school property if you're smoking. So I don't think that, from that respect, the enforcement piece would be much different than that.
But we're speaking not of seeing eye dogs and stuff like that. We're just talking
No,
about.
well, I mean, we can't do
Yeah.
that, and that would have to be in any kind of policy like that. You'd have to have that. And there's kind of just a blanket paragraph you can put in there. Actually, I have it in my policy at the library, how that incorporates that.
We had a similar conversation about weapons and firearms, and it's the same principle as far as enforcement goes. You can ask someone, but,
Yeah.
especially, activities that are after school, so.
Right.
But,
It allows, I mean, if we have a policy like that in place, it allows, let's say, ADs, when they're putting out schedules, to put at the bottom of schedules that our facilities are, dogs are not allowed at our facilities. So that information goes out to all schools that we are playing in whatever league or whatever are on the schedule. So somebody hasn't traveled 2 hours with their dog, and now it's, 90 degrees and the dog needs to stay in the car or something, so. We've been seeing more and more animals show up at sporting events, so, and, we wouldn't allow them inside if it was a play in the gymnasium, so I think we need to think about our property as a whole, so. Any comments from those of you that are joining us via Zoom? Or Google Meets, excuse me, wrong meeting.
Just a question about, there's some instances, I think, where even some of the educators will bring in a dog just who was kind of a special event. But I actually don't know whether or not sometimes when this occurs, if these are something like a certified therapy animal or something like that.
Sure.
So just curious about what your thoughts are about perhaps whether something like that is still okay, and so if you want some sort of, I don't know, maybe like a form or something like that, or just sort of some kind of approval process.
Yeah, I know some have brought like reading dogs in and things like that, and I think that, the one thing we've learned is, we have a lot more allergies and those kinds of things that we're aware of today. And it appears to me, just locally in our school, in our district, that generally that information is shared out, far enough ahead, so if someone has a problem or concern, an alternate plan can be made. I don't know how much of that is happening currently. I haven't heard of it here. I mean, obviously not within the last year and a half here, but yeah, I think that, there's certainly some, I think we had a llama or something come to the elementary school that was around reading at the, so I think that concerns are around, we have, dogs being just running in playgrounds, and areas like that. So when you show up Monday morning, that's, it's a problem. You have dogs that are in fenced areas that are athletic fields being used as, exercise pens and those kinds of things. And, we spend and budget a fair amount of money at our local districts to provide and keep these. And from my perspective, I think it's a health and safety when you're talking about dog waste on those facilities. So, and I guess, like I said, we wouldn't allow that in our gymnasium, and I guess we have to we have to look at our property in whole, whether it's, inside or outside. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see what the policy committee could come back with, and people can, say no, and we can continue on as we are, or see if, people think it's a good idea. All right. Hearing no major objections. All right, let me just write down. All right, new business. We have pre-K out-of-district enrollment.
You missed recovery plan.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, recovery plan. What I'm gonna move is just right along. Okay, I'm sorry, old business, recovery plan.
So my apologies for not getting this out ahead of time. I did not realize that both of the people who have access to the board list were going to be on vacation at the same time. So I promise that I will have Christine send out a copy of this afterwards so that all of the board members have a chance to review it as well. I'm just going to pull up a quick presentation for you. And I know that you have another presentation coming up in your board meeting, so I will be brief, but we had promised to bring forward information about the recovery plan to the GRCSU board this month, so we wanted to follow through on that promise. And I just have a few pieces of information about the process and where we are with the recovery plan at this time. So first, some early successes in recovery efforts. Some of these were part of our initial recovery plan activities. Some of them were just things that we started doing towards recovery before we even had an officially approved plan in place. We were able to return, as everyone knows, to in-person instruction 5 days a week during the last few months of the school year. We were also able to offer significantly expanded summer programming across our GRCSU schools and community partners this summer through ESSER funding, which provided is continuing to provide a lot of great opportunities for our students, getting them re-engaged and involved in summer learning, extended learning time there. Our recovery plan, we were able to submit our phase 1, which was the needs assessment phase, and phase 2, which was the initial plan. Both of those have been approved by the AOE at this point. And then we also got some assessment data at the end of the year that we were not able to offer SBAC the year prior because of the pandemic, but we were this spring, in addition to MAP assessments. So that gave us some really helpful updated data on student performance that we're able to use to guide our planning and inform our next steps. And we were able to hire 3 of the recovery team member staff that we had brought before the board some months ago. We've now brought on board a district data manager, a literacy coordinator, and an SEL coach, all of which who came on board July 1st to start that recovery work with us as well. Our recovery planning process, we started with guidance from the agency, as always, that outlined the 3 areas of focus for our plan. They designated social emotional learning, mental health and well-being as one topic, engagement and truancy as the second, and academic achievement and success as the third. So those are the 3 areas of the plan as designated by the agency. We got our task force and our team up and running. So what we did was we created a central team and the agency sent us guidance on what composition they wanted to see on that team, and we met that composition. And then each of those 3 areas of focus, we formed a task force that had much broader representation from across the district. Most of them have 10 to 15 members across schools, across roles, some external community partners like Project Aware or other agencies that we work with in the community closely. So really trying to broaden the input and involvement in that area. We completed our initial needs assessment. We completed our initial plan. And now we are in phase 3, which is the implementation and refinement of that recovery plan, just so you have a sense of our process and where we're at. Our needs assessment, phase 1, revealed a lot of interesting and important things for us to think about in planning to meet student needs. In the area of social emotional learning, mental health, and well-being, we really see that as a result of COVID and other related factors that some of our students have some significant things that they're reporting, feeling lonely, sad, anxious or stressed, looking for connections, and in need of support. So that, students who are struggling are not available for learning at the level that we'd like to see them at. It impacts everything about their academic program. So having that information, we've been able to design some specific plans to start to address those needs. And I'm going to do this in two parts. So I'm going to go through the needs assessment and kind of what we found, and then the second set of slides will be what we're trying to do about it. So for engagement and truancy, also in our needs assessment, we really saw a lack of engagement with many students. We saw a drop in participation and attendance, in particular with students who are remote. And we saw lots of struggles with getting students and families to engage and participate fully in a school program for a variety of reasons during the pandemic. So we really want to recommit to getting everybody back, getting everybody in, and making sure that students and families have both the wraparound services and supports and the accountability to make sure that they're in school on time, ready to learn. There's a lot, obviously, that goes into that. So we've got some steps in place for that. And then the third area of our needs assessment, academic achievement and success, we could see that student achievement had been impacted, obviously, as a result of the pandemic. And so across the board, we know that our students have made significant progress at truly again, credit to the teachers, staff, and principals who worked so hard with families in partnership throughout this pandemic to provide as many learning experiences as possible for students that were as close to, a real regular school experience as everyone could with the safety factors. But there's a gap between where our students were on track to be pre-pandemic and where they are now. And so we will be really focusing on, again, that highly engaging instruction for all, working on our curriculum, working on some supplemental instruction, and gap closing, supporting our teachers in accomplishing those activities. So phase 2, our plan for social emotional learning, mental health, and well-being. There are a number of activities that we have proposed to engage with in our recovery plan. One is implementing a universal screener and doing data analysis around student social emotional well-being. We did not have a formal assessment process for that in the past, and so with our Project Aware partners, we are able to bring in a universal screener for all students that will really help us to have a baseline on where everybody's coming back, along with some checkpoints during the year, and then we'll be able to really look at that and help us drive program development and resource allocation for schools and students based on student need. We also are able, with our SEL coach position, to bring in both additional professional development related to SEL and also specific coaching for teams and the referral process to make sure that students are getting what they need in buildings and that teams have the highest capacity possible to ensure that resources and responses are put in place quickly and effectively. We're going to continue coordination with Project Aware and PBIS, but we've actually folded those pieces into our recovery plan work. So again, not separate initiatives, but this plan encompasses work that we're already doing in those areas. I say PBIS, but some schools are officially PBIS schools. Other schools just have different systems of acknowledging students and creating positive culture and community. So all of those pieces. We have created a family community liaison position, not yet staffed, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. Some of the southern schools also had a telehealth pilot. We're going to continue that pilot and explore kind of, again, as we hopefully move beyond pandemic time, what that offers in resources to students in our buildings. We're looking at our school counselor role and responsibilities. It's one of those positions that kind of becomes a little bit of a a catch-all sometimes for scheduling, assessment scheduling, special projects, other things, and all of those are important activities in a school, but sometimes can take away from the counselor's ability to actually work with students one-on-one and in small groups. And we know that now more than ever, our students need the qualified professionals to be spending more time with them. So we're trying to look broad scale at how those folks are being used across our SU, what other duties are being assigned to them, and if there are other ways that we can accomplish that work so that they can spend the majority of their time just focused on student needs. And then we'll be working on our MTSS system, which is a multi-tiered system of support. It's designed to address the needs of all kids at the kind of tier 1 universal. 85% of your students in a regular gen ed classroom receiving regular supports, both academic and behavioral, are going to be successful. Your tier 2 is more targeted. You've got about 15% of the students that are going to struggle and are going to need a little bit more, whether it's academic, behavioral, social, emotional, to be successful in the gen ed program. And then you have your intensive tier 3, the 1 to 3% of students who are going to need, that level of expertise and really focused programming and efforts to be successful in our programs. So that's what we mean when we say MTSS system, both the academic side and the behavioral and social emotional side. So again, really looking at that, trying to make that universal across our schools, consistent across GRCSU, make sure that all our schools have the resources and the systems in place at each level of that system.
Family community liaison, is that ESSER money?
Yes. Yes, all of this is ESSER funded. Every recovery plan activity is ESSER funded.
And the school counselor, when you talk about that, how many of us have counselors in our schools outside of guidance counselors? Because when I think of the kind of professional you're speaking of, I don't think of that as a guidance counselor.
Well, I should differentiate between the two. So our school guidance counselors are, school counselors, I should say, are at the elementary level and the middle level in particular, are really focused on student needs, but it's not like a traditional counseling, I'm going to address your personal needs. It's access to learning. So they're working on social skills groups, they're working with students on a problem-solving plan if a student has trouble in a specific area with friends or with a class and how to approach it, then they'll support them in strategies to access learning. Those folks also make lots of referrals to external partners for those kind of wraparound services that students need, where it's more in-depth, one-on-one clinical work. So slight differentiation.
Lisa, can I just ask Lisa a question about, I believe we were part of the telehealth pilot program, but I was actually approached by both a board member and a community member. How did it actually function, or did it function last year?
My understanding is limited. I wasn't closely involved in the program, but I do think that there were just a lot of hiccups that related to COVID that didn't allow it to be fully implemented the way that it was intended to be. So they want to keep with the same group of schools, but really try and have a year where hopefully we'll have fewer restrictions and a smoother process to be able to really try it out and see what the benefits are for students. So for engagement and truancy, really emphasizing common attendance expectations and IC Infinite Campus coding across our supervisory union. The pandemic put us all in a situation of having to keep track of attendance in a way that we had never done before. What counts as a full day present when you're remote learning in a block schedule? What counts as tardy? What counts as early excused? So many different varieties of situations that schools have just never ever seen before. And so schools responded as best they could, but we know that again, with the return to full in-person, we need to go back to consistent common expectations of what attendance means, make sure they're the same across our schools, that they're clearly communicated to students and families, that everyone knows how to enter them into the system so that we can properly track them. and make sure that we've really got a close handle on students, especially those who are returning to our school community. We want to make sure that we are right on top of how that is going for them and able to intervene quickly if we see that there's a concern or a pattern that is not helpful to students. We also, in the pandemic, there were sometimes challenges with the normal truancy process in terms of courts being closed, Department of Children and Families talking about, priorities for families and school attendance not being one. External partners who usually help us with the truancy process were not able to do so for a variety of reasons as fully as usual during the pandemic. And so again, we're going to recommit to bringing those folks in, following our truancy process, and again, making sure that we know where students are, who's doing well, who's learning, who's engaged, who's not, and trying to get those supports in place for students and families when we see that there's a struggle. We need our students in school every day, ready to learn, and especially now more than ever. So trying to make sure that that continues to be a focus area, coordinating with our SROs, and hopefully bringing on a pathways coordinator to support additional choice and pathways and options for students, especially at that 7-12 level, so that students who are really seeking more non-traditional pathways to proficiency have more support and opportunities in that area as we move forward. For academic achievement and success for recovery planning, we've been able to bring on that district data coordinator and our literacy coordinator, so we'll be able to offer significantly expanded professional development in that area. We're also working on a literacy needs assessment, so going across the supervisory union, getting a very clear, detailed picture of not only what resources and supports are available to teachers and students in every building, programs, alignment to standards, what that looks like, but also then in practice, what's actually happening, not just what do we say we're doing, but what are we actually doing in classrooms. So we're working on a process to outline that, and we're focusing on literacy first, obviously, is just the gateway to all other subjects, and making sure that students are ready for access across the content areas, but also because Act 173, which is coming down, places a very heavy emphasis on literacy, and so this work should actually position us well for the expectations of Act 173 coming down the pipe very soon. We're also really excited to be focused on universal design for learning in our professional development as a core element of our work for both administrators and teachers this year. We started with a small secondary cohort in the spring around this area. We've now switched consultants and approaches, which we're excited about, but continuing with the same work and the same theme. Universal design for learning is really around supporting teachers in intentionally designing instruction that will proactively meet the needs of many students in the classroom through some specific design elements to it. So really supporting that differentiation and engaging all students in the classroom where they're at. Again, with learning gaps and COVID-19, more than ever, this is important for our teachers to be really proficient and fluent with these skills. So we're excited about that work. We're going to be looking at our GRCSU-wide intervention system and progress monitoring, so that tier 2 level of supports I was talking about for that targeted group of students. Again, we have a variety of systems and a variety of approaches across buildings, so trying to bring those together with more consistency, looking at interventionist caseloads across buildings, looking at the 7-12 intervention model, and really talking about a consolidated and aligned system for how we support students who need more beyond the classroom to be able to be successful with their content. Flexible pathways we talked about already, but tutoring, credit recovery, looking at some of, especially our secondary students who may have dug themselves a little bit into a hole during the pandemic, and now how do we help them to climb out of that hole and create lots of opportunities for students to be successful, to get back on track, and to start moving ahead in their academic progress and careers. There's also, with all of this work, a real intention to and a commitment to meaningful participation, and that means getting feedback from a lot of different groups. We'll continue. This plan is supposed to be an iterative process that had a very tight timeline and deadline with the AOE for our first draft, but it is designed now to be really truly iterative and to take feedback on the work that we're doing. They call it like a plan, do, study, act cycle is what the agency says, but make your plan, implement it, look at your data and your results, gather input from stakeholders and participation, and then figure out a new plan. How are you going to refine it? You're going to act on the information that you got. You're either going to stick with your initial plan because it's working, you're going to make some minor adjustments and tweaks to it and try again, or you're going to say this isn't working at all, we need to stop and try something else. And so we're really looking at this plan in that approach. And we'll continue to get feedback from a variety of stakeholders as we go through each of these iterative phases. There are also some specific grant requirements that we have to meet, both requiring meaningful participation and also just in general. So one is we have to have information available on our website, and so you'll see that there is a recovery plan link on our website, and actually on the homepage you can click, it's right there on the right hand side, recovery plan, and it will take you to this website or the link in the presentation. So there's specific information that's required by statute and by grant requirements that has to be on that site, and so we'll continue to post that there. We also have to do some specific kinds of surveys, and there are also specific stakeholders that we're required to include in our meaningful consultation. It's a great list anyway. We want to be all inclusive to begin with, but we just need to make sure that we meet the requirements of the grant funding coming through in that way. And then I am the point of contact for the recovery plan, and my contact information is on the website also, but anyone can reach out to me with questions, input, requests for additional information at any time with anything related to the recovery plan. And that is all I had for today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Lisa, you talked about the 3 tiers. Does that mean every child goes through an evaluation? Or the evaluation only comes when somebody falls maybe out of tier 1? So you don't have a baseline for maybe all the kids that are in tier 1, but you do have a baseline for maybe 2 and 3?
Yeah, both. The answer is both. So we have some benchmarks, screeners, we call them, that we use. We use the NWA MAP screener from an academic perspective. We administer that 3 times a year, and that gives us the academic quick snapshot of how our students, and then based on student performance in the MAP, we might do additional assessments to try and dig deeper if a child is either showing incredible growth way beyond their peers, or if they're showing struggles. So we have kind of a tiered system of assessments where you get everyone universally gets a check-in, and then depending on how you perform on that, we might follow up with other things. We've had the academic side of that in place for a while. What we haven't had is the social, emotional, behavioral, individual student risk kind of side. And so that's what we're able to put in place this year for the first time. We've had some interventions in that area, but we haven't had the baseline assessment for all students.
Well, I guess my concern would be that you do have, you can find students that are doing well academically, but they have the emotional thing that isn't checked on that can lead to problems down the road, maybe not even till after they graduate from school. So I guess my concern was just, do we have a baseline for those, it's like those achieving students, we just sort of let them run off. We don't check in with them sometimes with the other parts of their life.
Yeah, and that's the SEL screener that we're putting in place is universal. It's for all students. Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions for Lisa? Could we get like a quarterly update on the recovery plan? So we're in July, if we did like October, January, April. Kind of have, that would be some time to see if anything has happened or significant changes or.
Sure, we can certainly do like a formal presentation. I think Chris and I both intend to report in our monthly reports to you on significant activities in the recovery plan. It will be, again, we've tried to make a plan that incorporates everything. So it's not a lot of separate initiatives, it's one plan that we're trying to implement together. So it will be a big focus area for our work in all areas of the supervisory union. So we think we'll be reporting on a regular basis. And we've also talked to the staff that we've brought on for the recovery team about providing us with information on a monthly basis that we can then share in some format. We're still figuring out exactly what will make sense so that that's coming back to you on a regular basis as well.
Okay. Great. I don't see any questions from Margaret, so thank you very much. And we will move on to new business for pre-K out-of-district enrollment for discussion. And who would like to lead this topic? Lisa?
I can. I mean, I think this came through Wellspring, so.
It did, but it kind of
Eric knows
covers
a lot
all
about
of
it
us.
as well.
Yeah, so basically we have a request for pre-K out of district, and it was rejected because of past practices, and so the individual sent a letter to the board, and that's basically where we're at. We thought that a decision to allow this would set a precedent for the supervisory union, and there's more to it. Lewis provided some information in regards to that, and I believe that's it.
Chris also provided a copy of the policy and procedure from Mill River, just as a sample. They do have a procedure in place for how they handle requests as a district, so just as an example to the board of what that could look like. Just for some context, we now have universal pre-K programs in all of our districts, and most of them are at capacity with waiting lists. So we do have students within the GRCSU that are unable to access, excuse me, GRCSU pre-K programs. And that became part of the conversation around allowing out-of-district students versus in-district students. It's a more complex, nuanced discussion than an isolated incident, which is why the Wells board thought it would be important to bring this forward to the GRCSU board for some discussion and decision-making around how we want to handle pre-K and requests for students from other districts to attend.
Meredith, did you have anything you wanted to share or add?
No, I think, what Lewis sent along is very helpful in sort of clarifying what appeared to be a little more muddy when we were discussing it. So I think it's fine.
Are members interested in having the policy committee look at a policy and put that in place, or provide one for us to look at, so that we would have a universal policy in place for all districts?
Lisa, I think I'd like them to look at that. I don't know if we necessarily need it right now, but this is an area where I can see us being questioned on in the future.
I think ultimately we definitely need to have a policy for something like this. If if no one has any other comments or suggestions as far as how to proceed forward, I guess that would be the next step, would be my thought.
Yeah, I think the nice part about policy for something like this is it allows you to refer to policy when the request comes, and that we're all looking at it at the same level, so one district isn't operating differently. So, not to be, the easy out, but policy sometimes serves a purpose nicely for things like that. without having to make these case-by-case decisions, which become very cumbersome.
It would be, it would be difficult, and, you know, where we're at, we have, you know, 2 smaller communities where it might just be an easy answer, but as far as the SU goes, where you have, you know, large communities, that decision may not be so easy to make, so, and that's why we're here.
Chris had also noted in this that, again, in the absence of policy, there is no policy, and that it would be helpful, because there is an outstanding request in one of our member schools, that it would be helpful for the board to consider some kind of statement or motion around, while policy is being developed, whether we intend to accept or not any out-of-district placements at this time in the interim.
Discussion on that, or interest in making a policy related, or not a policy, a motion related to that? I think the key that Lisa kind of hit on is that, I know Corey Valley, we historically have wait lists. So it's difficult, almost unconscionable, I think, to displace one of your residents for someone who is not a voting member or paying member, I guess, with respect to taxes, et cetera, to your district. I mean, I would be upset if I was on a wait list and someone that, you know, out of district slid in and got a spot. I'd have a difficult time trying to justify that if someone came to the board, but personally.
Why would that be considered? Why would you consider boosting somebody on a wait list?
Well, because I think right now we have wait lists, so.
Right, but even if you were to consider them, you'd simply put them at the bottom of the wait list.
Well, but they.
I mean, I'm not saying I would consider this. I actually, looking at Lewis's analysis of the whole 10-hour being the obligation program versus what we're actually providing and how to charge for it.
Right.
It gets extremely complicated, but I don't think you would ever take someone in and put them ahead of people on a wait list.
Right.
Even if you were to accept. You'd put them on a wait list.
Yeah, and you start, that's what I'm saying, but if you start putting them on a list, they can come ahead of someone. They're not gonna constantly stay at the bottom of the list.
But you're
I
saying
suppose.
you may be,
But regardless, I feel like this is so much more complicated than even wait lists that, you know, we ought to make a motion to not accept out-of-district placements at this time.
would we consider him a tuition student? Or along the lines of a tuition?
No, that's where, if you look at what Lewis presented, it gets very complicated.
Yeah, that's why.
Hours.
Yeah. But I see what Lisa's saying, so let's say, you know, my child comes in, he's 10th on the list, now he's 3rd, and somebody else who's in the district now is 10th. Is that what you were kind of
Yeah,
saying?
I mean, once you get on a list, you stay on the list, so, I mean, I'm just hypothetically just, I like your suggestion of a motion.
But how it worded, and what's it gonna say, you know, that's the,
I think if you just keep it, priority will go to student in the district, no matter what. It doesn't matter if that's, you know, part of the policy.
It becomes difficult for our smaller schools that don't have a wait list. And especially if this, you know, is someone in the school community, but not a member of the district.
why wouldn't they be?
You know, it just makes it difficult.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can have someone, you can accept someone from out of district and then have a family move in and, you know, months before the start of school, and that family could potentially be on a wait list. It's possible, but I agree. I mean, the billing part of it and the hours seems a lot more complicated than just allowing out-of-district students. How would you charge? How would you bill?
I know years ago, we had, as part of the teacher package, that they could bring their children there. So I believe that was eliminated, though, wasn't it? Through
It
the
was.
negotiation, yeah.
So are you considering your statement as a motion, Meredith, not to accept out-of-district pre-K students at this time while, just at this time, I mean, we don't have to say while policy is being considered, we could just say at this time.
I'm inclined to include the, while a policy is being drafted
Okay.
portion. Because I think that's,
Could we use the word pending?
being drafted.
So Meredith would like to make a motion that says not to accept out-of-district pre-K students while policy is being drafted.
Correct.
Lynette, you're seconding that?
Yes, ma'am.
Any discussion around that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Me?
You're opposed? So I need to know how many we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 to 1. Majority, passes by majority. Okay. We're just filling up Eric's agenda here for policy. I know. You're going much longer, Eric. All right, so now we come to the fun part, and if you have a in-person packet, half of your packet. So Jeff?
Hi.
So Jeff is here, and you received it electronically also to give a presentation for the strategic planning. So if you want to introduce yourself, Jeff, and,
Sure.
okay?
I'm going to, bear with me here. I want to share my screen. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Oops. Okay, bear with me. Tell me if this is working as soon as I'm going to pull up my presentation. Do you see the cover page?
Looks like it's loading, Jeff.
Okay.
We can see, you have present mode, but right now it's showing the meet. It's not showing your presentation.
It's not showing my presentation. Okay, so bear with me here for a second. Let me see if I can change that. Let me go back into... I'm going to try this button to see if this one works.
There you go.
You see the presentation? Yay,
Yep.
baby. Okay. Okay, so first of all, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I can turn up the volume if necessary. So, very excited to be here with you today. My name's Jeff Torchinsky, and I'm proud to be part of the Battelle for Kids team. I'm going to cover 4 main areas of the presentation today. I'm going to try and keep it to about 10 minutes, and then I'll leave some time for Q&A. I may be able to get it done in less than 10 minutes, so that's what I'm going to strive for. A little bit about Battelle for Kids. We're a nonprofit organization committed to collaborating with school systems and communities to to realize the power and promise of 21st century learning for every student. We're focused 100% on the education market, and we're made up of a whole group of passionate and dedicated people who are inspired and fueled by this vision. One of the key questions that drives our organization is we're 21 years into the 21st century, and our education system's keeping pace. When my oldest kids, and I won't tell you my age, but when my oldest kids were attending school, the primary area of focus was on core curriculum. Today and into the future, we're expecting to see an added emphasis on other learning competencies, like critical thinking, collaboration, ways of showing inspiration, aspiration, and creativity, and other 21st century skills. We believe it's extremely important to be intentional and integral, and do not believe that 21st century skills and rigorous academic content should be treated as supplemental. We don't see this as an either or, but we see it as an and we believe in focusing on both. So when we think about the pace of change that is occurring in the world, it's been really shifting very dramatically over the last 20 years, and we're seeing continued pace in technology, global markets, economic development, and we're seeing that we expect this to continue at a frenetic pace. So how do we best prepare our students for the future? We believe that it's really critical to follow a process that's both aspirational and combines rich data analysis to create a plan that can help guide a school district through the journey. At BFK, we follow a 6-phase process. The first 2 phases are what we consider our portrait of a graduate, and the next 4 phases are the remaining portions of the strategic plan. So when you consider this, if you finish the first 2 phases, you're going to have a creation of an aspirational vision for your students in your district. Once that has been created, we then kind of look at the gap between that vision and where the current state is. And then this gap then becomes the area of focus and can be addressed system-wide in the development of strategies and approaches that will help to align that vision with kind of practical execution across the district. From a timeline standpoint, this imagery kind of gives you a flavor for the process that we would follow and the length of time. Please note, though, that we're very flexible in terms of how best to work the pace of this. We can adjust this as we start the process. We can adjust this to go faster, to go slower. And again, it's based on the input from the design team and the leadership team. And our goal is to find the right pace to ensure that we deliver the right results. One of the key emphasis that we place is this idea about leveraging our community stakeholders. And our role in this process is to facilitate. We're there to be beside you. We want to focus on the power of this diverse group of individuals and drive the right level of discussion and focus. We stress inclusivity and not just following the loudest voice. We build in time for reflection between meetings. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, people all learn at different and think at different paces. But it also reinforces the idea of discussion, and it promotes the idea that this is everybody's plan, and this isn't something that's already being predetermined from central office. The process that we follow is organized and deliberate, but it also is very personal. We're there to guide your team on this journey. It's not our portrait of graduate, it's not our strategic plan, it's yours, and we're there to ensure that we're going to give you the best opportunity to deliver on that. We can do that both in a virtual mode or in person. We talked about the phases, the 6 phases, and the first 2 phases are that portrait of a graduate. And what I'm showing you here are 2 examples of portraits of graduates that were developed. And this gives you graphical representation of the end result of this 2nd phase. And it illustrates the competencies that the district felt were very important. And it also starts to provide some visionary elements to kind of illustrate the direction that the district is moving forward with their students and where they're hoping their students will be upon graduation and upon moving on to the next phase in their development. So, but part of the results are not just the graphic representation and the competencies and the descriptors, but it's actually the process that you follow, because what it does is we found that it builds a tremendous amount of trust and support within the community. People are working together in a combined effort, and what it does is it kind of unifies the approach, but then ultimately when you come to the end result of finishing off the second phase, it then allows actually the next phases to run in a more smooth fashion, and it makes that type of work, which is typically much more hard, a little bit easier to accomplish. The next 4 phases, so after the portrait of a graduate, is we focus on the strategic planning process. And again, the big part here is we want to make sure that the strategic planning process is aspirational and dovetails from the portrait of a graduate. So it needs to be linked. And what we'll do is this is where we now start pulling in the data and the perception data and start looking for trends and insights that we can then act upon in the formation of the strategic plan. There's going to be 3 key deliverables. There's the current state analysis, and this is really where the culmination of all the data analysis takes place, and this helps to create a SWOT analysis. And then there's the strategic planning framework. Think of this as kind of guide rails that are going to help to ensure that we stay on track and we really make sure we stay focused on the main things. And then ultimately through discussions and breakout groups, ultimately a strategic plan is formalized. And this will either be written by your team or it'll be written by our team, and we'll go back and forth, continuing to collaborate and build upon this. And this becomes a planning document that will help guide the district towards their vision for the students in the community. These are some comments from a superintendent in Windsor Central about the power of this work. And I can tell you this was not something I asked for. This was something that was provided to me after some discussions that I was having with this superintendent about some other matters. And I asked him if I would be able to use this in future presentations. And then this is a comment from a parent and a school board member. And they were really looking at the collaboration aspect of this and how critical and important it was to work with all the different stakeholders. So with that, I'm really excited to be considered a resource to facilitate this exciting journey. I want to thank you for your time today, and I'm going to open it up for questions.
Questions? Anyone have questions for Jeff? I don't have a question, but I do think that that this would be beneficial for us as an SU, and I think it would be something that would be different for us. Even when we were the old SU and we did things like this, we would have people within our organization facilitate this, and I think it makes it difficult to have a real just like open and honest kind of conversation, because it seems like there's already kind of preconceived packaged ideas about what things should look like. So I think that is one piece I really like. The portrait of a graduate, I think, is an important piece for all of us to have, and would be incredibly beneficial to each district, no matter what grade levels you're currently serving. And the other piece is, I think, that unified vision. We have, and Chris has been good about incorporating that on just about everything you receive now from the email and like that. And that was not a vision that was created by all stakeholders. It was created by administration, by teachers. I don't know, maybe, and maybe some of you feel differently, that you think it does really provide where we are and where we're going and who we are. So thoughts, comments? The second packet, there's no presentation, they just sent this, and it's pretty generic. It wasn't, I mean, it was like we just went on and downloaded it from the internet, so they didn't ask to come or provide a presentation. So they were offered that, but they did not decide, so.
I was very impressed with your presentation. I thought it had a lot of good information. It was tailored to our needs. I like your timeline. So thank you for putting all that work in.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been excellent to learn more about the district, and we're very excited to be able to work with you moving forward. Should you decide, and you know, we're, again, from our standpoint, this is what we do, and this is a big part of our business. So working with districts around the country, it's very exciting for us.
Lisa, can I just ask you a question? When you made your comment a moment ago,
Yep.
you said that what you're seeing that we're currently doing was not put together by very many stakeholders, because I remember being involved in that process quite a lot. So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
In the lead, you were a stakeholder in developing that?
Yes, you.
No, we were not. That was something that Adam brought to us.
Yeah, well, we developed it. I remember going to a brainstorming retreat program that was facilitated, that we were all worked on that. Am I imagining this?
It was, I know I can go back, but it wasn't something that we felt at Quarry Valley that we were big participants in.
Yeah, we worked on this in West Rutland at their community center, pretty sure.
Yeah.
Nobody else remembers this?
That was before me, so.
For me too.
Yeah.
The afternoon
No.
before me.
Lynette? No.
Sorry,
but-
but I don't. Was that, yeah, how long ago was that, Meredith?
Well, it was after the merger.
Yeah.
Right, but I was just wondering if Matt was in the meeting, then I wouldn't have been.
It's possible. It like I said, this was a retreat where we actually worked on things.
Well, I guess I would just say, with respect to the LEAD acronym, even now,
Yeah.
you ask people, they're not exactly sure what the letters stand for.
Well, I know that it was worked on, some of that was worked on more specifically with, I think, administration and teachers, but
Yeah,
I know we also did an awful lot of work on this other stuff to redefine it. And then they took it back and finished it off.
it was brought to us.
You know, I'm not saying that
I mean-
that's a reason for why, but I just feel like, I know I was involved at least to a certain extent, so.
Sure.
Was Laura involved with that, Meredith?
Yeah, Laura would have been there.
She did.
I actually think Kathy Latender may have facilitated the meeting. This was in the West Rutland, it's
maybe
a
the
community
town
center
hall.
of some sort.
Town
We
hall,
actually
maybe.
had West Rutland musicians, West Rutland High School come and play music. It was an involved thing.
No. No.
Well, I actually have a question for Jeff.
Sure.
So, I'm trying to phrase this right, but do you, how do you expect a lot of challenges with like the stakeholder engagement between all these different communities and districts spread far apart?
We've had a fair amount of experience working in Vermont. So we've had, our engagement leads have worked with districts that have, all gone through some of the same kind of amalgamations and supervisory union formations that you have gone through. So again, it's something that we recognize that it's not all from one, it's a diverse group, but you're all still sharing some of the same common services. You're trying to work together, but also recognizing that you have your own distinct, towns and communities. So again, from our standpoint, that's a big part of why we want to make sure that as we work with the leadership team, we will identify the right type of individuals that we want to include in the design team, and to make sure that we get the right cross-representation. And you'll know some of the people who are very vocal, but you'll also know some of the people who aren't. And we want to make sure we get those people included. We also will be looking for students. We'll be looking for maybe other individuals where the system wasn't as successful for them. So we want to, encourage your team to provide us with some of these individuals so that we can invite them and make them feel part of this process. So again, based on our experiences and based on kind of the nature of this, we find that when we ask people, they're typically very willing, and then when we show them how inclusive and that we really do want their input and that we haven't pre-formulated anything, they typically are very favorable towards this and get very engaged.
Thank you.
Jeff, could you explain what Roadmap 21 is?
Yeah, so Roadmap 21 was an option that I had talked to Chris about. I think at this juncture, this was not going to be part of the discussion. It was, the positioning of Roadmap 21 was, once you have created your portrait of a graduate and you have gone through that process, and that typically takes 4 to 5 months, at that juncture, we'll have this vision that says this is what we want for our students. What we have then offered is an optional service where we can take a group of 5 individuals from across the district, and these individuals can attend 2 two-day sessions. And what they do is they basically spend that time discussing what are some of the obstacles, what are going to be some of the challenges that we're going to see across our system that we need to be aware of. So think of it as preparing these 5 individuals to almost be like super ambassadors through this process as we move into the strategic planning. And we find this is for some districts that have gone through a lot of reunification, a lot of changes, we have found that this can be very valuable because it then helps everybody else. It provides them with additional tools so that they can then go back into the district with more information and more tools to make the process run as smooth as possible as we're going through the strategic plan. So does that explain it effectively for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and the way I left it with Chris is we can make a decision anytime down the road if this is something that we feel makes sense, and we can kind of make that self-determination after we've gone through the portrait process, or phase 1 or phase 2, to determine if this is beneficial or is this something that's not necessary. And we're very flexible that way to then adjust as necessary.
Thanks.
Seth, questions, comments?
No, I think that the presentation was quite good, Jeff. Thank you very much for your preparation.
Thank you.
Taking the bid very seriously with what's included and what's not, and definitely shows that you've been chatting a bit with some of the leaders in VSU as well. And I'm just going to echo some of what Lisa and I were saying before, that I think that it is definitely is very important work, and I do like the approach that you've outlined here. Whether or not the existing, that was predates any of my interactive time, so I can't comment on that there. And can't really comment on how the stakeholders really feel. But at the very least, it looks like there's at least some confusion from that previously existing, let's say, the vision and the strategy, or the vision and the vision. Therefore, I could definitely appreciate experiences. I'm not even sure what the word is, but just having the stakeholders involved with the development process, that you definitely do always end up with a better buy-in situation. It's still never going to be perfect.
Right.
In reality. But it definitely helps, and the comment was made that it creates for some open, let's say some more open dialogues. I have definitely watched firsthand before where when you break up into some of the smaller groups and have them working amongst themselves, maybe without somebody that might intimidate them sort of being involved in the group, that definitely does encourage the other. Again, you're never going to get perfect from everybody, but I like the approach, and again, I really appreciate the break.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and yeah, we find that our experiences have proven that the approach is can be very inclusive. We really strive to do that, and our engagement leads are excellent at pulling people in and encouraging them and giving them the opportunity to talk and also to change the pace so that to give enough reflection time in between so that it makes people feel like they're part of something and they can actually see themselves in the work, which I think is extremely important.
Meredith?
I really don't have a comment. I mean, obviously it's something you guys want to move forward with and want to be involved with. So I've always kind of wondered what happened to all that work that was done. But it doesn't really matter. If you're talking about wanting to be engaged and representing what the current board is concerned about, then there you go.
Okay. Lynette?
I really don't have a comment. I'm kind of in between here. I just think we need to talk about it. It's a wonderful program, and it's got me thinking, but kind of like Meredith, I'm trying to figure out what happened in the past, and I do see this where it could pull us all together. There are still some areas in the GRCSU where, we need to build trust, but I think this might be a way to do that and make sure that we're all on the same page. But I am curious about what Meredith was saying and the work that was done, and if it changed through our administration or what happened, I'm not sure. But so I just have some questions, but it's a wonderful program, and Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, and I would tell you that we would want to pull in as much of what was done previously to incorporate some of the thinking, the ideas, we've had conversations with other districts because of, COVID has changed so many things that we have found that people now look at certain situations in a whole different mindset now than they did 2 years ago. So I think from a refinement standpoint, it may turn out that, some of the work that was done before, we may be able to repurpose pieces of that or incorporate, et cetera, or leverage as much as possible. And that's certainly going to be a goal. But we want to make sure that, clearly I'm hearing that there's some, potentially, new board members. There may be other individuals that are new to the district and the supervisory unit. So this could give an opportunity to just either refine or further enhance and make sure that this is something that you all feel strongly about, and that would ultimately be our purpose and our goal in going through this journey.
Mary?
sorry, I didn't have my microphone on there. I feel like I'm very new to the board. Not even aware of what was done before and, where the need for this is coming from. So I really have no comments at all. It does sound, from listening to Jeff's presentation and, watching the slides, I do feel it looks like a very thorough process, very focused process, and I guess that's it.
All right. Tina?
I already said
Okay.
my comments. Yeah, thank you.
Mike?
Pondering.
Excuse me?
Pondering.
Okay.
Which is I probably align myself more with what Lynette said.
All right. Eric?
I like the idea. I think every year we do the same thing. I like the idea of doing something new, but I'm, thinking of, how does this actually, not just as an SU, but I am thinking K through 6 schools. How does this specifically focus on those students as well? And I'm also trying to picture this whole process. And it was a great presentation, Jeff, but I'm still trying to, see this as a whole and how this is implemented. And again, it says district leadership orientation and a lot of reference to district. Are you when you say district, is that just when we say district, we have our individual districts, but are you talking about an SU-wide district
Yes.
leadership? So it consists of stakeholders and board members, from all these different districts.
Yeah, so what we're envisioning is we were envisioning having some representation from across the supervisory union to ensure that we see kind of 2 groups. We see a leadership team that is, we want to work with them to explain to go through the process, to understand some of the history, to understand where this fits relative to other initiatives, to get a better feel for what is going to give us the best opportunity for success. This is a group that some of these individuals may then be on the design team. However, what we do is we typically go to the design team, and that's when we extend it into the community. So we're looking at students, we're looking at businesses, we're looking at parents, we're looking at past graduates. We're looking for individuals who care about the future of their students, who again may be vocal or may not be vocal, but we want to encourage that these individuals are part of this inclusive process. So this design team is going to do the bulk of the work, and they will actually we'll be meeting with them multiple times in meetings to discuss why the changes, why is this important, what are some of the other, what's driving this, how does this fit, how does this, when we start talking about competencies and 21st century competencies, what are they, what makes the most sense for the district, why, can we come to a consensus, and how might we describe this, and what is the best way to represent this as we move forward? So that it's multiple meetings that this group will go through, and then ultimately we see this design team would take their recommendations. We would incorporate a graphic designer who will sketch ideas and the descriptors. This design team will ultimately come forward with a recommendation that will then go to that leadership team as this is what we, based on our work, this is what we believe is best representative of the view of the district. And then ultimately, that will go back to the board for hopefully approval based off of these 4 or 5 months of work. So that's kind of how the process works. Let me mention one other thing. You talked about K to 6 versus high school. That's a really great question, and that's one that we get a fair amount. Because what we've found is some districts that we talked with, they initially looked at this and said, oh, this is just a high school program. But what ended up happening is we ended up having discussions with some of the teachers and some of the individuals within the elementary portions of their district. And they said, wait a second, we want to be part of this because this helps us understand that we need to graduate our students from kindergarten to the next phase, from elementary to middle school, from middle school to high school. And from that standpoint, they wanted to feel like all of the work, if we decide that critical thinking is an important competency, how do we now take that competency and integrate it into the curriculum so that someone in grade 2 and 3 will be able to think about how do you scaffold critical thinking? How do you teach that? How do you do it in a way so that it registers with a student at that age? And it needs to be done in a different way than for somebody who's in 5th and 6th grade and for somebody who's in 9th and 10th grade. But it's a progression. So it then becomes these are the important aspects that we need, but we need progression through the different grade bands so that when they do get to high school, they're more prepared for success as they continue to move forward. So again, from our standpoint, we strongly believe that it should be a focus throughout. And part of the challenge can be, how do you scaffold this and how do you take some of these competencies and teach them and take them down to different grade levels? And that's part of the work that is can be challenging, but that's also where we look for how do we work with our teachers so that we can incorporate some of the best practices so that it's something that you can actually see, some of the successes of the students and see how they're able to exhibit and showcase their talents with these competencies. So it's very challenging, but it's also, when you can tie it all together, you can start to see how the benefit of that progression can really work.
Great, thank you. That was my next question about K through 6, and you answered it. You mentioned curriculum. How much does this change curriculum or alter it? Is it?
From our standpoint, it identifies probably maybe gaps or areas of additional emphasis. And then that is then something that typically the curriculum team will then look at what they're currently doing. And every district's a little different, and every state is different. But what they're currently doing, and are there areas that can be enhanced or furthered, or are they feeling like, hey, this part we're really addressing some of these skill sets. Let me kind of use an example of like critical thinking or innovation or collaboration. What we found is that how a lot of teachers have a sense of instructionally they understand how they're very good at that, but one of the challenges that sometimes occurs is how do you assess these skills in the students, and how do you it's different when you're looking for science or math or some of the core schooling. However, when you start looking at some of these other competencies, it becomes a little bit more challenging. So how to communicate it, how to set the stage, how to integrate this into the curriculum so that it doesn't become just something we do once a month and this date, but it's actually integrated into how we teach the subjects that could be math or could be arts or could be science. So thinking about how can we leverage and integrate this type of thinking into that curriculum. Every district's at a different stage and a different level, but that's some of the discussions that will occur through this process.
Thank you.
So I understand this is, roughly a 2-year process. What do you do after this? Do you come back in? What's sort of the next level?
Yeah, great question. So what we'll end up doing is we actually have a status check. So 6 months after we're concluded, we will come back in and we will say, okay, you've had the opportunity now, the strategic plan has been developed, you're now starting to incorporate that and work through your budgeting process and prioritizing your efforts moving forward. So we're coming back in to get a pulse, to get a sense of, okay, where are some of the challenges? Where are some of the successes? We're looking for areas where we either can assist, or maybe you don't need any assistance or anything along those lines. But one of the other pieces of this is that we also have a network that is part of this. So what will end up happening is your district will then become part of a network of other networks, other districts around the country. And these are all districts who are working through a similar process. And so it's people who are thinking about these competencies, and they're looking, some of them are ahead of you, some of them are right where you are, and some of them aren't even starting, they're just starting to think about it. So what will happen is this network of leaders, district leaders, and teachers and principals, we actually share best practices. We provide a learning platform. So there's successes. We do virtual events where we'll actually go into classrooms. We went into a school district in Indiana and took a camera in, and we actually went into kindergarten, we went into grade, I think 4 and 5, and then we went into high school to see how they're integrating these 21st century skills and competencies into their everyday practices in the classroom. So it's this type of sharing, this type of, I guess, networked effort is also part of this, which reinforces and helps you build added momentum, and it helps you accelerate with your learning. So it's not just us offering suggestions, but it's other people who are doing exactly what you're doing, who are able to share and encourage you through this process.
Still pondering, Mike?
What brought this about? Was that you and Chris, or?
Well, as we started talking about the recovery plan and looking at the work that we have to move our district in response to the pandemic, really underneath every single one of those areas is work that remains to be done with unification. And really the two are, for us, are intertwined in that, we can get back to where we were before the pandemic, but where we were before the pandemic wasn't finished with the unification process. So we still have a lot of work to do, I think, in many areas of the SU around unifying our SUs, getting to equity and consistency across our schools, building systems, procedures, expectations, having a clear and compelling vision of where we're going. It also ties into prioritizing and trying to make effective decisions both with our time, our staff and resources and our budgets. And if you don't have clear priorities, then everything's a priority, right? And that's a challenge in a supervisory union of our size, that different districts have different things that they're emphasizing, individuals within our district have things that they're emphasizing, and Chris and I are currently the filters for everything, but we don't want it to be only our voice and our view on the filters. We want everyone to have a say in where we go, what we do, how we prioritize, how we move the work forward, and a process like this really allows us the opportunity to do that. ESSER funding allows us the opportunity to take this recovery plan and this strategic plan and make sure that this short-term investment we're making in recovery activities is actually building a foundation for things that will happen when that funding and the recovery plan are completed, so that our district will be in a much better, more stable, unified place at the end of that work than it was at the beginning going in. So, I think that we see, up here you get to see all the pieces and parts and how it all fits together, and we see a lot of opportunity in a process like this to really complete that unification process. And, we sort of jokingly say sometimes that this is like unification year 0, right? Because we had superintendent turnover, a part-time interim superintendent, and then a pandemic in our brand newly formed supervisory union. So we have literally had 0 stability and opportunity to make bold, big steps forward in that unification process. And they're needed. They're needed for so many reasons. So I think both of us really strongly support strategic planning and the process of strategic planning and trying to really become GRCSU and have everyone involved on board and invested and excited about where we're going. Act 46 was also attention creator. And for many communities, the process of unification was not smooth and not always positive. There were still a lot of pieces of that we're carrying forward, and we need school communities and larger communities that are excited that we're all together, excited by the possibility of us, excited by what we promise children and what we're able to offer them. We want people to want to move to GRCSU communities and want to attend GRCSU schools, and for us to be able to do that, we have to show them that and show our communities that this is a good thing, and having all of our schools and the resources and brains and capacity that we have, we're going to do a better job for everybody's kids. And I think we see this process as a big step forward in helping us to do that work and supporting the effort.
Lynette?
Yeah, thank you. Meredith, I do need to apologize. My memory has come back. I had to go back a little farther than I thought. And that brings it up. I mean, I love the timeline on this, because after a few years, you tend to forget where we are and who's doing what, and with the changes. Lisa, you know how I am. I'm all for this new stuff, but I don't want it to have to take 5 years for implementation, because there's a lot of kiddos that are losing out on it. So I do apologize, Meredith. I do remember, and the band was awesome that night, now that I'm thinking back on it. So yeah, I'm a little enthusiastic, if nothing else, the timeline, and we can get it all done and put together in a quicker fashion than we did last time.
Yeah, and I'll just comment, that it's the leadership team that is going to help us really think about the pace, think about the right speed of this. Obviously, with the unification and all of the efforts that have gone on, we want to make sure that we're responsive to everybody to feel like they're part of this, but at the same standpoint, you're right, something that takes 5 years, it just drags on too long. So we need to find that right pace, and we're flexible enough that once we start the process, we can adjust accordingly. What we strongly recommend, though, is that when we're done, we would like to have it done in May, June time frame, so that it has an opportunity to be integrated in with some of the budgeting discussions going forward. And then also it can be properly kicked off in the fall for the new year, so that if you decide to have a retreat, you decide to pull all your teachers together, you now are coming forward with them with, this is what all of this work that we've done, here's now what it now means to you, and what we're planning on doing moving forward. So we want to make sure that, and those were some of the conversations that I had with Chris about the timing, just to make sure that you take this information and you can really do something impactful with it, so you don't lose momentum and you leverage the good content to be able to continue to move forward. So I think balancing all of that is a little tricky, but it's very doable, and with your inputs, I feel confident that we will be able to take those, your expertise into consideration and adjust accordingly.
How would the board like to move forward?
I'm all for it. I mean, the way we're going now, I don't know when we're ever going to get everybody on board on the same plan. It's just kind of cumbersome, and we've got so many new people that I don't know if they really remember the plan anymore. I'm all for doing this. Like I said, I love the timeline, and I don't know, I feel like it's needed at this point because of all the changes that are going on, and perhaps we can actually get on board and get everybody else, the teachers and everybody else on board with it.
Was that a roundabout motion to go forward with the proposal?
Sure.
I feel like I'm crafting the motions tonight.
Do we need to talk about cost as well? I thought I seen it in here
It's
somewhere.
on page 27.
Yeah,
I love you, Lynette, but my thought on this was, I think we should table it for further discussion. That would be a motion that I would make.
okay.
Because I don't think everybody hears, and I don't think everybody, I think we can discuss it here, but I think it also needs to be discussed in more detail in our respective, on our respective boards. I think that it deserves that kind of discussion.
Would you
I would
like
also
me
like
would
to
you like
hear
me to
more.
exit? I'm sorry, would you like me to leave so you can talk?
No, I think we just don't have the people here to do that. It's not anything that
Okay.
you've done, Jeff. It's that, in my view, I would like to involve more people. I would certainly like to make sure that the building administrators buy into it, in that they're here today, but they may be gone tomorrow, but that plan still would be in place if that's something we implemented. We'd want to, that to stay in the school and not change because we change an administrator or a superintendent or even school board members.
Right, but I think that's the entire goal of creating this plan, that no matter who is seated at the table, the
Right.
plan is in place. And
Right.
I guess I don't know how that discussion expands or changes going to the districts to discuss that.
Well, I think it goes back a little bit to what Lisa said. If there is still some feeling that we're not united, that it needs to be sold. And I think if it's sold effectively, then it becomes a buy-in. I'm always of the belief that you throw the stone in the pond, you get that first ripple. Well, maybe we're the first ripple, so the next ripple needs to be the administration. And then after that, the parents understand what we're doing because they're the taxpayer. Just some thinking, that's all.
Is this funded by ESSER?
Yes.
Yes.
So okay. And
That was my
How many kids
question.
do we have in the district roughly? Just rough number?
1,500.
1,500?
I feel like waiting too long, though, it pushes that timeline back and makes it take longer. Because if you shift it and he comes up with a plan completion in September, then it's harder to implement it at that point because there's not as much time to get everyone on board. And I also think that the way that this is structured, it's actually allowing all the administrators to weigh in. They're asking for stakeholders, parents, administrators, teachers, community members. So I feel like everybody would be, have a say as to how we're going forward.
That was my question, if it's funded by ESSER. And from what I understand, that money has to be used specifically, right? So,
Well, it should be tied to a recovery plan.
Yeah.
So this work clearly dovetails right with the work that we're doing.
all right, and, yeah, I mean, usually, decisions that, take a lot of money, I understand that, they may need more time to consider, but, I kind of agree with Tina.
Okay. Meredith? We can't hear you, Meredith. You're muted.
I'd like to second Lynette's pseudo motion.
Okay. So her motion was to go forward with strategic planning and contract with the Tell for Kids.
We also need virtual versus on-site. I don't know.
Excuse me?
There's two choices, the on-site, which I think is people from his company coming to the area, or virtual, which is more of the Google Meet or Zoom platform.
Right.
I might also, and I hate to even say things like that, but I think some of that will be dependent upon the situation in which we find ourselves in the world in the coming year. And it's very difficult to, no one can predict at this time. So I think we could talk about which options we would prefer. But I do think that if you're moving forward with the proposal, we should leave both options on the table so that we can adjust as needed based on conditions and whatever happens.
Well, she
Yeah,
kind of
and
did.
let me
and I
just comment
helped.
on the Tell for Kids. We had, during COVID, That was when we introduced the virtual option. And we have decided that we're going to continue to offer that. We have some districts that have moved forward with us, and we have said they really want to do this in person because they're just yearning for that community get-together to get people working together in kind of a unified fashion. So we're starting in that manner. However, if things change, we can adjust, and we will adjust, and the pricing can adjust accordingly. So, I mean, we're doing this for the right reason. We want to make sure that there's enough flexibility, both from a timing, but also for the methods that we're going to be utilizing, and we want to make sure it makes good sense.
Meredith?
Is hybrid an option? I mean, doing, obviously depending on how things are going, maybe, we could be doing this and doing in person like we're hybridized here.
Yeah, so right now, what we do is we have the first leadership kickoff team meeting is done in a virtual fashion. Then when we do on-site, we do meeting 2, 3, and 4 with the design team, and that is done in person. So it kind of, right now it's a little bit of a hybrid, but when we do virtually, it's every meeting is done through Zoom. And I'll tell you kind of the pros and cons, what we found. We were a little bit surprised. One was the virtual events, we actually found that participation levels were actually increased because people didn't have an excuse for not being able to make it. They could easily make it. It was just much easier to get access to and be available. And even today, I see some people who are in person and some people who are calling in from remote. So it just gives you more accessibility. The other part that we found was we expected the engagement levels to go down being virtual, but we found that they really didn't. People actually stayed through the process. And the engagements and discussions were very positive. So we see both positive, but I will tell you that some districts that we're working with right now are saying, I know we can do it virtually, but I want to do it in person. and then there's others who are, right now, let's plan for this. So we can go either way, whatever makes sense. The simplest would be go forward with on-site, and then we can always adjust down. If some of these become virtual, then we end up reducing the amount, but then you don't have to go back to the board for additional funds versus, or the other option is you go virtual, and then if you decide you want to have some on-site engagements, then what we do is we would provide you what those expenses are for that meeting, and that can be something that, I don't know if that has to come out of ESSER funds, or that could just be coming out of some other funds just to fund that expense. So whatever's the easiest for your supervisory union, we can do it either way.
Seth?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Jeff. And just to elaborate on that, what do you find for, I guess when I go from the networking connections that are made, as we're talking about inter-district, district, through different schools, et cetera, my experience with everything has always been in person. It's always a better from that networking and sort of connecting. However, you were directly involved. I wonder if you, I guess, A, can you comment just in general on that? And then B, did you actually see that change in any degree as things were kind of forced into the virtual realm, and now maybe they're catching up a bit?
Yeah, so to answer that, what we saw was, I think it was a concerted effort by everyone to get adjusted to doing things virtually. And I think initially it was, well, this isn't going to work. Then it became, well, this is the new norm, and you need to make it work. So I think people put some extra effort and extra energy, and candidly, people got a lot more proficient at the virtual meetings than, and everyone was performing them. So from that standpoint, I think the acceptance level increased. I think the skill level, our facilitation actually, we really became good at running a virtual meeting and ensuring that we're still able to pull people in by using different types of technologies, different types of of sharing technology so that everyone had real-time information at their fingertips, and we were kind of crowdsourcing and pulling all that together. So I think it was still very effective. I would tell you that from a networking standpoint, you have a pulse for your supervisory union and where you are, and there still can be a lot of power and energy and value in having people from different communities get together and spend 2 hours working on something and sharing their views and their ideas and having to work together side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes they walk away with a different appreciation for that other person than maybe they might not get over that virtual, because sometimes you don't see those verbal communications, you don't see some things. So I would tell you, I can't tell you which way to go, but I would tell you that we will make both work well. And I don't need to know today if the decision was made today, I don't need to know today. We could actually go forward with, the next step in our process would be if you guys said, yes, we want to do this, we have to put together a statement of work which reflects the RFP response and the proposal that we have put together. And then it's an MSA and a W-9. So ultimately, that buys you a little bit of extra time to then determine. And then at that point, you still haven't made a decision. We can just say, we're going to go forward with it this way, knowing that we can still adjust and work with you in a way that makes the most sense. So did I answer your question, Seth?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to contract with Battelle for Kids to move forward with strategic planning, and I have a second. So I am going to call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 So I see everyone on screen, Seth, Meredith, Lynette, Mary, all voting aye. All right? So 4, 5, 6, 7, and opposed.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority. All right, thank you very much, Jeff, and
Thank you.
Chris and Lisa will be in touch.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today, and very excited to work with you and support you moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
Madam Chair, can I bring up an item that's not on the agenda?
Sure. This late, Mike,
Yes,
you, of all people,
it's
you like
appropriate.
to scold me about the agenda.
It's appropriate. It's about the agenda.
Okay.
My suggestion would be is it Kristen who does the agendas?
Yeah.
To ask if consensus to remove the time frame off the agenda. I think the chair does a great job in moving the conversation along. I think it's a waste of her time to try to sit down and think about it, maybe if it only takes a couple of minutes, but the time that I've been here in the past, rarely do we follow that number on there, so let's take it off and just clean the agenda up.
Okay, that's fine. I don't think she'll probably be opposed.
But I mean, it would have to be something that would be directed and approved by us, I would think. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, the chair and the superintendent put the agenda together, so I don't think it needs a motion
Just
to be able
take it
to
off there.
change that. All right.
Can I also just clarify that from before the pre-K
Yeah.
discussion? I think we said in the motion that it was out of district, but then when you brought up district versus supervisory union question for Jeff, it just made me think, if, say, someone from Rutland Town wanted to go to Well Springs, which wouldn't happen because they're so far away, would that be okay because they're still within the union?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then
Yeah,
maybe...
that's the whole reason to keep it this way.
Right.
It gives us the opportunity for our teachers who might work in Wells to bring their kid to pre-K, so they are part of our supervisory union, our district.
But they would still not get priority over...
Yeah, they would, because they're in the supervisory union.
But in the Well Springs area, why would they get priority over those students that are in Well Springs already, in that district?
Well, I suppose that could be a policy consideration, but I believe because it's supervisory union based, the idea of not choosing a, what is it called when we choose a district area?
Designated region.
Right. If we don't choose that, which we don't, otherwise it prohibits our staff from being able to bring their kids along.
So I thought
To where
they
they're
said
working.
that they weren't allowed to do that earlier.
So we don't in.
For pre-K, they do. They're allowed to.
Across the SU?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I get what you're saying. You're saying,
It should say,
It should say
you
out
wanted
of
to
the
say
union.
not to accept out of the
Union.
GRCSU.
Instead of the district. I just think it should be reworded, because the way we have it worded, it's not exactly right, I think.
Who made the motion?
Meredith.
Meredith.
Meredith could
I
amend
did.
it.
I
She-
suppose you.
She amended it.
Be
We could,
amended to say supervisory union. Those are terms that do get
Interchange.
confused.
Yeah,
but you have to have a motion on this, motion to make it, just,
yeah.
yeah, and we would have to vote on it.
motion to amend the motion.
I can make a motion to amend my original motion to reflect supervisory union as opposed to district.
I second that.
So the motion on the floor would be to allow the motion to be amended, or to amend it, correct? Yeah.
To amend the motion.
Not to change the vote on the motion.
No,
but just
to amend to reflect SU in place of district. All of those in favor to amend the motion. to
Aye.
reflect.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Okay. Anything else? No, that's fine, that's a good catch, and it's true. We do use district and SU interchangeably, and so sometimes you get lost in it, so.
This is why we need policies.
Yeah, that's where policy helps, we just flip through the little binder. All right, so the next meeting is August 25th, it will be here. I have no reason for an executive session, no one else has notated a reason for executive session.
I would like to make a motion for adjournment.
All right, Lynette makes the motion to adjourn at 8:09. Second?
I will.
Second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
You guys have a good night, rest of the week.